Absolutely. And Utah has never won in the Los Angeles Coliseum. This is a good chance for Utah to break that duck. But, Utah is having its own struggles as well as USC this year. Obviously, Charlie Brewer leaving the team, that didn't work out. And really, we're seeing a lot of offensive lines. You're aware of this as you cover the sport nationally. You're seeing offensive lines at Clemson and Oklahoma, although the Sooners were better this past weekend. But Utah's another team where the offensive line was supposed to be a strength, and it hasn't been the first month of the season. Now, the Utes were off this past week, and they really needed it, not just for football reasons, but also because of the tragic death of Aaron Lowe, defensive back. And they lost Ty Jordan, the running back, in December. So this is the second player shot and killed in a 10-month span. Now, the Ty Jordan was an accidental gunshot wound, but like 2 players dead from gunshot wounds in a 10-month span. So Utah needed this past weekend to grieve, to mourn, take that time. And who knows what kind of a team USC is going to see this upcoming weekend. But strictly in terms of the football, the X's and O's between the white lines, Utah needs to get a good effort from its offensive line. And, we've seen USC's defensive line get shoved around by both Stanford and Oregon State. And the whole key to that game, Mark, is can Utah's offensive line lean on USC's defensive front and win that particular battle? If that doesn't happen, hard to see the Utes having a path to victory in the Coliseum.
Matt, how do you make out this Pac-12 South Division race? It was certainly a situation during the offseason where there was a Utah camp that just felt that program was so stable, rock solid year to year. As I mentioned, won the last 2 division championships prior to the COVID season of 2020. Of course, Charlie Brewer coming in with much experience from Baylor, where he led them to a Big 12 championship game. You had your USC faction. The talent is going to win out. The recruiting rankings going to win out. Of course, Arizona State's been building with Jaden Daniels. It appeared okay in his 3rd season. They may be the dark horse team. UCLA made the first statement of the season, of course, at the Rose Bowl against LSU, and some people jumped on that bandwagon. Zach Charbonnet getting off to a hot start at running back. Right now, Arizona State certainly came up with the biggest win in the division thus far this past weekend at the Rose Bowl against UCLA in what was a very dominant performance in the second half, leading just by 1 at the break and then taking it from there. So how do you look at this race in the Pac-12 South at this point?
Yeah, it's a real mess. And obviously just right now, at the moment, Arizona State would certainly seem to be the team with the inside track, not only because it just beat UCLA, so ASU would have a tiebreaker over the Bruins if they had a tie in the standings at the end of the year, but also because Utah and USC are struggling. So Arizona State clearly playing the best of the main contenders, but the question is this going to last? And you always see teams that struggle in the first half of the season and then find their sea legs in late October, early November. So maybe that's going to be the case. Now you have ASU going to Utah on October 16th. That's going to be a very pivotal game. And if Utah can win that game, beating ASU, then that throws the Pac-12 South into flux all over again. And here's the other thing, Mark. UCLA didn't just lose to ASU this past Saturday, but LSU lost and Fresno State lost. So LSU was UCLA's quality win. That went kaput. And then Fresno State was the quality loss for UCLA. Fresno State was viewed as a Group of 5 contender with Cincinnati and SMU, and the Bulldogs then blew a 24-10 lead on the island. So UCLA's resume just collapsed, and it's pretty clear that the good things UCLA did against LSU and the competitive game UCLA played against Fresno State, well, those both look a lot worse now compared to a few weeks ago. So the shine is already off the notion of a Chip Kelly resurrection. That's not going to happen. Maybe UCLA can still win the division by beating Utah and beating USC and getting some help from some Arizona State losses. But like UCLA's ceiling now might be 8-4, and no one's going to get overly excited about that. So it's really a mess. I mean, Arizona State, Jaden Daniels might be the best quarterback in the Pac-12, but let's be real. Arizona State played 2 cupcake games. They were generally sloppy in those games, then committed 4 turnovers and 17 penalties in the loss to BYU. So you have this good performance against UCLA, but like that's Arizona State's resume in its entirety. So like Jaden Daniels needs to go out and play well over the next 2 months to really confirm himself as the Pac-12's best quarterback. If you look at the Pac-12 quarterback room, it's a disaster. I mean, Keaton Slovis has underperformed. Oregon lost because its quarterback, Anthony Brown, just wasn't up to par. Dorian Thompson-Robinson and that UCLA offense, they got shut out by Arizona State in the second half. Chance Nolan of Oregon State, he torched USC, but then he didn't even throw for 50 yards this past weekend against Washington. So when you look at the quarterbacks throughout the Pac-12, there's some talent, but there's no consistency week to week. And so you sit here after the Oregon loss and the Pac-12's playoff hopes just massive hit. You wonder why this conference isn't in great shape to make the playoff. Just look at the quarterbacks around the conference. It's not a pretty picture. And so Jaden Daniels, though, he has the chance to really plant a flag over the next 2 months. But Herm Edwards, Arizona State teams, they usually step on a rake at some point. And so even though the Devils have the inside track in the South, no one would dispute that at the present moment. As we've mentioned, they still have to prove that they can be very steady and very reliable over 2 whole months. And that point remains to be seen.